right, I'm using a word today that not everybody likes. It's called church. Oh my. It's just a word. And it doesn't distinguish us in any other way. I mean, there are a lot of Christian churches who call themselves fellowships. It's just a matter of semantics. And I know that church is a word that comes with considerable baggage. But at the same time, like I said, there are many fellowships out there. But today I'm using that word church in its more generic term. Because even though our message is different than many churches, organizationally, from the outside, we don't really look much different. We like to think ourselves as being very different, but from the outside, organizationally, no, we're a church, people. We are a branch of a church, of all this. This is the kind of the history of the Christian church. We're down here somewhere. There we are. Let's see. No. Yeah, we're down here somewhere. All right. Yeah, we started up here with the original church up at the top, and it kind of all went. This is a simplified version of this. All right. It gets really complex, and that's just the Unitarians. Universalists are in there somewhere too. It's a complex mess, and we're very much a part of this history. This is our history, whether we claim it or not. And just likewise, this church history is very complex, and it was a branch of religion that is also very complex, and it didn't just come out of nowhere. It evolved out of a very rich milieu of Jewish, Roman, Greek, Egyptian, Persian, Celtic, and countless other cultural and religious traditions that were competing in the rich marketplace of ideas that was the Greco-Roman world of the first century. For example, there were state religions and countless smaller cults and societies. Now, when I use the word cult, again, I'm using it in an academic sense, not its pejorative sense. A cult is just a system of religious veneration or devotion directed towards a particular god or object. There was a cult of Demeter in Greece, a cult of Isis in Egypt. There were many cults and there were many gods, and they all coexisted kind of in the shadow of the state religions. Now, the official state religions included the various city gods of Greece. The gods, like Athens and had their own gods, and one of the cities had their own god, and their official temple with their official worship that included state-enforced sacrifices to support said temple. Yes, enforced by the state. And then temple worship in Israel operated in much the same way as in Greece. And in return, the temple priests sanctioned the rulers of the state with God's blessings. Now the Romans, they were more to the point. Citizens were required to worship the emperor as God. Straight and simple. And there were just as many, like every state had their own god, their own religion, but on the other hand, the cults were existing separately, and they were voluntary associations. In most city-states, most states, if you were there, you were a citizen, you were a member of that religion. But the smaller cults and societies were voluntary associations, and they were very secretive. They tended to be secretive. Its members always, were told to be very secret. They had secret ceremonies, secret stories. And where state religions supported and upheld the culture, the various cults were often very counter-cultural. They were there, these communities, these voluntary communities were there to help people, to promote, spiritual growth. And the secret stories, rituals, which often included the use of entheogenic substances and practices, like drumming, dancing, to a point of ecstasy, a word that meant in the Greek, standing outside oneself. Standing outside oneself in order to be able to see who you really are. And why were these societies so secretive? Well, Terence McKenna points out that entheogens, psychedelics, are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. They are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information. They open up an individual to the possibility that everything they've been taught may not be true. This is why the states don't like them. Why? And it's the same for many spiritual practices. They help people wake up, see through the power structures that serve to control the mass of people. Now, in first century Palestine, there were many of these transformative communities, these cults, competing, all living in the shadow of the state-supported temple worship. Now, in Palestine, Israel, two of the groups grew prominent following the fall of the Jewish state and temple destruction in the year 70. And these groups were the Pharisees and the followers of the Way, or what we call today Rabbinical Judaism and Christianity. They were they existed in the shadow of the state religions. And they existed as such through most of their history. Christianity continued to exist outside the social structures. Judaism, until the past century, existed, again, outside the state structure. But back to church history. The Christian church existed. They met in people's homes. They were a small, countercultural group, persecuted by the state religions. And they were very much countercultural. And they operate under the radar of the Roman state religion. They had secret rituals. They had secret stories. And it took as long as 7 years for a person to be fully initiated in their religion. It was generally recognized to be this long, arduous process that proved a person's ability to live by the rules and to keep the secrets. It was a transformative experience. It changed a person from being basically a drone of the state to a full-fledged human being, making their own choices. Some scholars have even suggested that the Eucharist in those first few hundred years may have included entheogenic substances, psychedelic substances. But then in 325, in what many people would call a inspired move to unite his newly won empire, Constantine converted to Christianity and named it the official state religion. And this changed everything. Attention shifted from transformation of individuals to collaborating with the secular powers to maintain order. The long, arduous training and secretive nature of the church was changed overnight as everyone wanted to conform and be baptized. And that 7-year-long initiation was reduced to the acceptance of a uniform creed, also established in 325. So, in just a very short time, Christianity shifted from this culturally transformative community to a state religion and all the trappings that go with it. This is how they used to meet, around a table, talking. It became this. overnight. The hats. Anyone know why church leaders wear those hats? Because the emperors wore those hats. Because the political power wore those hats, so they started wearing those hats. State religion, the combining of church and state without exception, leads to corruption of both state and religion. The state gains the power of the controlling metaphor of society. It gains control over people's subconscious, essentially, and can manipulate them to do things they would not do otherwise. Religion itself ceases to be purposely transformative due to its nature to want to stay in power. It's at this point that I started to write this big long rant about the separation of church and state and what's going on in our current political scenes. But that's a whole another topic. And I'll come back to it some other day, I promise. But I want to stay on topic today. Because what point I'm getting to with all this is that this is our history. This is our history. And we still, within our structures, how we do things, this comes down to us. The vestiges of history are in our current structure and culture, even in Unitarian Universalism. As I mentioned, from the outside, for somebody not familiar with our message, we appear to be much like most churches out there. We're meeting on Sundays at the traditional time. We're set up in rows, all these different things. We look like a church. We like to think of ourselves as a countercultural in many ways, but a more accurate statement would be that we are a subculture, a variation of the norm. All well and good if one is happy and content with the general direction of the dominant culture. But if not, though, if we're not happy with the general direction of the dominant culture, then maybe it's a good time to reconnect with our history, with that countercultural element that is in our DNA but isn't always expressed. To bring it back into the light of day, or light of candles. Now, if it was my choice, I would begin this process right now and essentially start from scratch. Or not exactly, I wouldn't start from scratch. I'd start with anybody and everybody who would like the idea, who wants to follow me, and we'd start from there. And to be completely honest, that's probably the next stage of my life, is to start something like what I'm talking about. Only time will tell for sure, though. But for now, it's not up to me alone. It's up to us. And I believe there are things this fellowship, this church, can do to reconnect with our roots. As a countercultural movement, a movement so strong that the Roman Empire couldn't defeat it, and so usurped its power and used it for its own ends. So what I'm talking about is something called a Wiki Church. You all familiar with that term? We all know Wikipedia, right? The word wiki was introduced by a computer programmer named Ward Cunningham in 1995. He had created a collaborative software that he called Wiki Web. And wiki is Hawaiian for fast, quick. And as a noun, it now means a website that allows anyone to add, delete, or revise content by using a web browser. Of course, this is a very simplified understanding of how wikis work. There are numerous variations and complexities, but I'm not here to talk about websites. I'm here to talk about Wiki Church, a church that is collaborative. And we might think, oh, we're very collaborative. We do a lot of things like that. But who here decided that we would meet on Sunday mornings at 10:30? Anybody? Who here decided that we should set up our seats in rows instead of a circle? That's the culture that we came into. The model of church that is dominant today is a church that is fixed to a building, fixed to set times, set ways. In the 1950s, Unitarianism experienced a tremendous growth. And what had occurred was people were no longer satisfied with traditional messages at their churches, at their traditional Christian churches, especially after World War II and all that tumult and doubt of where does God have to do with this? And this was a lot going on culturally at the time. So in the 50s, this basically humanism really kind of became a popular thing, and it came into Unitarianism, but why it mattered was that people, this was the 50s, and there's a lot of people in science and education, they were worried about being called atheists. They were worried about being called communists. And so it was good politics. It was good for business. It was good for your career to be part of a church. And so they started a lot of Unitarian fellowships. It came out of the Red Scare. And it was allowed to be part of, we kept the structures, changed the message. And so that was a big part of our growth. And I'm not saying that this model is bad, but why do we keep doing it? Why do we remain so static in how we do things? A Wiki Church. Now, Wiki Church is adaptable to changing conditions and needs. It's fast and quick. That's what Wiki means. So that if people can't be here on Sunday, we can start a group that meets on Monday. Too much talk, not enough talk on Sunday. Church is too serious, not serious enough. We start a different group that meets different needs. A critical element of a Wiki website is that it operates on the principle of collaborative trust. It's people working together for a common purpose, and no one person is in complete control. Doesn't mean there aren't standards and rules. It's just that those rules and standards are agreed upon by the group. It's a religious anarchy. And it's a redefining of church. So we're redefining church to communities of healing for the universal raising of consciousness and helping others. I can't really see it all, but it's still church. It's a reclaiming of the original countercultural origins of the church and the other societies that preceded it. It's a branching out from our corporate structure and meeting people where they are, and when they are, and how they are. The Wiki Church doesn't rely on a top-down bureaucratic decision-making process. It trusts its people in the process that has been established. And if you think that something like this is impossible, it's just a dream not grounded in reality, then think again. In every community, in every city, in every small town in this country and around the world, there are communities just like I described. There are Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and any number of other 12-step groups operate under basically these same principles. Quite successfully, and they've been doing so for nearly 80 years. I had a professor of religion who argued, and I think successfully, that Alcoholics Anonymous and other 12-step groups is very much a religion. In many ways, they're more religious than Unitarian Universalism in that they have actual beliefs and practices. Yet they function without clergy, without professional leadership of any kind, really, and they have been doing it, like I said, for 80 years. I have a good friend in California who even started an AA group for atheists. So the idea is out there. But what we need is a step program for everyone. Because we're all addicted to something, right? We all have our issues. We're all addicted to something. According to an article on the subject, Buddhist nun Pema Chodron agrees that we are all addicted to something. She says it's simply part and parcel of our human nature. Chodron explains that we are restless, irritable, and discontent. We find it impossible to just sit still and be. So we distract ourselves with activity and entertainment, cell phones, texting, video games, iPods, TV, movies, magazines, nonstop busyness to keep us looking everywhere but inside ourselves. We mood alter with substances, sugar, alcohol, drugs, nicotine, caffeine. And we do it with activities, shopping, gambling, sex, work, viewing porn, etc., etc., etc. Chodron says that we are unable to simply be awake and present to this moment because we're afraid. We haven't been taught. We haven't learned how to just be alone with ourselves, to be in the moment. So I think that a simple but profound system could be developed to fill a void left by the decline of traditional churches in our society and reach the growing number of people who define themselves as spiritual but not religious. Now, last month I talked about the importance of sacred activism, and I quoted Andrew Harvey. He said, "What we are being asked to do is not to fix the existing system, but to radically transform it so we no longer, by our choices, threaten our lives and the lives of millions of species. And we can only do this by radically transforming ourselves." And in that talk, I laid out a simple 3-step path to help us in that process. Acceptance of the world as it is the first one, acceptance. Or if you prefer, to model ourselves to be like the universe itself. The universe supports us as it does all life. It doesn't judge, any life is just part of life. It doesn't guarantee a long life or a happy life, only life. And it's up to us what we do with it. I noted that the tendency to judge is natural and had certain evolutionary advantages at one time. But today that same tendency serves only to divide and distance us from one another. And changing that now could mean the difference between life and death. So acceptance without judgment. The second step was to let go of the past and let go of expectations of the future, including the idea that this is a monumental task. And the final step was to seek wisdom, which boils down to the fact that spiritual practices like meditation, prayer, worship, feeding the homeless, fighting for social injustice, these things help us develop those qualities we associate with wisdom. Those are 3 steps. But for something like I'm talking about, I'd add some more maybe. I'd add a few more, including the importance of community, the needs of helping others. 5 steps, 5 simple steps, easily adapted to Christian theology, Buddhist or pagan, or just about anything else. acceptance, let go, seek wisdom, build community, help others. The groups could be set up around these. You can meet on the beach. You can have a 5-step meeting on the Appalachian Trail. They can meet anywhere. Life is messy. It's complicated. It never goes as we plan. And a Wiki Church celebrates that. It's built on that principle. Life doesn't go as we think it should be. It never has, it never will. Traditional churches treat life, I say, like it's a movie. The traditional churches say that it has writers and directors and producers dictating to everyone, the actors, where to stand and what to say and what to do. They have an idea of how things should be, right? That's how a movie is made. And some people treat life like it's this movie and it has a beginning and an end and there's a plot to the whole thing and and everything is supposed to be just right. Well, the Wiki Church, it recognizes that life is more like improv, where we are the actors, we are given a scenario, a set of conditions, and we need to build our own story from what is at hand and with who's around us. There are no shoulds, only what is and the choices that we make in the moment. And the good news is, there's only just a few basic rules for improv. There's lots of rules for making movies, but only a few for making improv. These are according to Tina Fey. She says, say yes. No stops to the actions. No blocks the energy of improv. Stops it in the moment. So say yes, and then say yes and. For a story to be built, whether it's short form or long form, the players have to agree to the basic situation and then the setup. So say yes and. And after the and, add new information. Make a statement. An improvised scene can't move forward or advance unless we add new information. So everybody's a part of this. And fourth, there are no mistakes, only opportunities. There are no mistakes, only opportunities. Those are the 4 rules of improv. It could be the 4 rules to life. Say yes. Yes, and. Then make a statement. And everything that happens is an opportunity. Many churches want to tell us that we are incomplete, that we are sinners. They want to say what we should do with our lives and who we should be and who we are. Wiki churches say yes. And they say they're there to help people find what they're looking for. Wiki Church doesn't block us. It doesn't say no because our schedule doesn't fit some outdated rule about when church happens. It doesn't say no to who we love, what we believe, or how we live our life. The Wiki Church is imperfect as the people who participate. And like all of us, it will take missteps, and it will learn, and it will grow from those missteps. And without a belief system or identity rooted in the past to protect, that it must protect from new revelations and new ways of doing things, it's free to branch out in new and creative ways. It's free to evolve to the changing needs of society and life. I hear much lament in this Unitarian Universalist congregation as I do in all of them. Where are the young people? Where are the children? Where are the families? Where is going on? Well, where are they? They're not here. Doesn't mean they don't want what we can offer, but they just can't necessarily be here when we think it's convenient. So, what do we do? Well, I threw out an idea in this month's Quest, our newsletter, the idea of covenant groups. Now, covenant groups are small groups that meet regularly either at the fellowship or in homes once or twice a month. A trained facilitator works with each group, which are generally focused on a particular topic or interest. And I mentioned a few topics in my article like spiritual direction, art, ethical eating, social justice, Buddhism, travel, parenting, and the list goes on and on. The topic, though, is secondary because the primary purpose of a covenant group is building trust, sharing our stories, all of which is spiritual growth. Covenant groups are a step in the direction of a Wiki Church, in that what happens there will be up to those who participate. Small groups, intimate groups, more intimate than we can possibly be on a Sunday downstairs drinking coffee in large numbers. Now, I would like people, if you're interested, to talk to me. If you want to know more about covenant groups, you want to help get one started, let me know. Because once we have enough people signed up, we will schedule meetings to explore the concept more deeply. My goal isn't necessarily to transform this fellowship. My goal is to make it more inclusive, to provide spaces for more people a way in, to build community, to live out our principles in more and varied ways. However, if this is successful, it will transform the fellowship. We have a good thing here in St. Augustine. We have an important message, more important now than ever. And it will be up to us, each of us, to help get that word out in new and creative ways. This is one of those ways. I hope, if it interests you at all, that you will see me and see what we can get started here in the coming year of 2017. So be it. Amen. Blessed be.